What is up, wrestling fans? It is Kevin, and you're watching the Two Bros Wrestling Show, officially on the road to WrestleMania, as we all are right now. Royal Rumble took place this weekend. That is our main event topic. Most of the news this week is most of the wrestling news in the world is centered around what happened in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We had surprises. We had a lack of surprises we expected. We're going to get all into that in our main event, but there was a little bit of wrestling news outside of that. We'll quickly cover that in our opening bell segment. Honestly, the biggest news that wasn't related to the Royal Rumble is something we all probably saw coming. Last week we talked about Tommaso Ciampa finishing up his time in in WWE. Spoiler alert. As you saw this week, if you watched Dynamite, the Blackheart is back. He appeared on AEW television on Wednesday night. By Saturday night on Collision, he was facing Mark Briscoe in his first match, and he walked away the TNT champion. I think this is a good move for Tommaso Ciampa. If you're like me and have been a fan for a while, you've got to admit that the WWE version of Tommaso was Tommaso Light, the Blackheart, the Psycho Killer. That man lived on the NXT brand, and before that on Ring of Honor. He never really got to show fully what he was capable of on WWE's main roster, unfortunately. Obviously, AEW has different plans for him. That much was clear by his first week, which was by every account you could imagine successful. It was a great match. It was nice seeing him get to stretch and show what he can do. So here's hoping that Tommaso has a good 10-year run, just as he did in WWE, and gets to ascend the ranks a little higher than he ever got in his former employment. Speaking of AEW signing, folks, they officially signed Persephone, who also had interest from WWE. So in this way, they sort of poached her, if it is true that WWE also had interest in the rising female star. But no word yet on when she'll be making her appearance. But congratulations to Persephone, who is now going to be appearing on AEW television. WWE made a signing this week, and they made a big deal about it when in connection to what we're going to be talking about here in a few moments in the Royal Rumble, and that is they have signed their first Saudi Arabian superstar. I will not even attempt to pronounce his name, but it's Fahd is how he spells his first name, and Tuwaiq is the last name. He is a professional arm wrestler and power lifter, and obviously WWE is signing Saudi Arabian talent to help bolster the ongoing relationship that they have now had over the last decade and continue to have and strengthen with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Who knows what a power lifter / arm wrestler will have as far as pro wrestling talent. Obviously, we have many examples of pro wrestlers coming from other sports and being successful. We have just as many, though, who were failures. And let's also not forget that there was once a time, not that long ago, when WWE was planning global expansion and looked to be starting up a Indian division and signed a bunch of Indian talent that by this point have all washed out of WWE, as that never came to fruition. Those plans for NXT India never occurred, and most of those individuals did not end up sticking with the organization, looking like they had a whole lot in the way of wrestling talent and acumen, as it were. So who knows if this Saudi Arabian power lifter / arm wrestler actually is going to have translatable skills to an international audience or to pro wrestling in general. Time will tell. And that is as good a segue as I can give, talking about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and WWE and Royal Rumble. Let's get right into our main event. If you haven't watched Royal Rumble yet, we're getting ready to get into some spoilers here, so you'll probably want to hit pause, go watch Royal Rumble, see you back here in 4 hours. If you've already watched Royal Rumble, which I imagine most of you at this point have, or at least know who has won and who showed up. Please play along at home. Obviously, I'm without Doug again this week, so I want to hear from you and what you think. So we're going to talk about the whole shebang from beginning to end. Before we get into the matches and our predictions and how those fared, let's talk about the event in general. I know when I previewed the Royal Rumble last week, I went on for a bit about the relationship that WWE has with Saudi Arabia. So let's talk about how it looked. First of all, the stage was very impressive. It was very much a hot crowd that was in there. They brought their A game to elevate what was going on in the ring. It was amazing that this stadium was a parking lot not more than a couple of months ago, and that they built this stadium. All that said, though, there were limitations that we had wondered about, speculated about what would happen when they went to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to have one of their big events, as they did by bringing Royal Rumble, one of their tent poles. The sound was a little off, at least it was on my broadcast. It felt like some of the mat wasn't mic'd up great. But more than that, really, though, was the fact that you're starting to see, in my mind, the product of diminishing returns by consistently bringing the same superstars back to the same basic location. It is Royal Rumble, and they announced a crowd of 25,000. That is low by Royal Rumble standards. Certainly nothing compared to what we had in Indianapolis for last year's Royal Rumble. And on camera, you could very, very easily see in this makeshift stadium the empty seats that particularly populated the upper realms of that stadium. So if you can't get more than 25,000 in for Royal Rumble, by far the biggest event they've ever brought since they had this relationship with Saudi Arabia. Next year, they're bringing the biggest event that they have. WrestleMania will take place in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia next year. And they couldn't get more than 25,000 people, could not fill all the seats for Royal Rumble. Who knows what WrestleMania will look like next year as they try to get 2 nights worth of maximizing the dollar of the ticket, as well as the attention span of the public. So again, the folks that were there, they brought it, but there definitely was something that lacked when the presentation, and most of that had to do with the fact that they were in the middle of the afternoon for most people watching in a stadium that was not full in a country that obviously there is controversy around the relationship even being what it is. So all that said, we still had a Royal Rumble. How did the action in the ring go? Let's start with the very first match, and that is the Women's Royal Rumble. I know that we had speculated on who would appear, who would be some surprises. One thing I had said was that I fully expected that WWE would take advantage of their AAA relationship as well as their TNA relationship and have some of those individuals perhaps as surprises. Neither of those happened in the Women's Rumble. Not the case for the men's. We'll get to that when we get to that. But in the Women's Rumble, I was a little surprised by the lack of surprises. And lack of surprise primary, number one, I'll just go ahead and say my prediction for a winner. Well, you can't win if you do not play, right? So Bianca Belair, who I thought has to be close to returning from injury, who I fully believe will be back and have a major match at WrestleMania, did not make her Royal Rumble appearance and therefore could not win the Royal Rumble. So I was 0 for 1 right out of the gate, and that was one major return that a lot of folks expected. I wasn't the only one. That just did not occur. As far as folks that we could say were surprises, they were more call-ups or NXT talent rather that have maybe had some screen time on the main roster. Someone like a Sol Ruca, but we also got Lola Vice, who's been on NXT and AAA quite a bit. We had the NXT Women's Champion JCJ appeared. Kalani Jordan appeared, but as far as returning from injury, it was really just Tiffany Stratton. And the biggest surprise, undoubtedly, of the women's Royal Rumble was not Nikki Bella, who had entered at number 25, but her sister, Brie Bella, came and appeared at number 27. And it's been 4 years since Brie has been in a wrestling ring. So legitimately, you could call that a surprise. The audience was very much in favor of this development. They greeted her with a lot of chants, most associated with her husband, but still, it was obvious that they were happy to have her back. Don't know if this was a one-off to test the waters or if she's now joined her sister full-time on the roster. I honestly think that that would be the best. You can't say that Nikki Bella's time in her return to WWE has gone really as was expected. She did not get over as a face. She showed a bit of rust. Her initial feud that was supposed to be her return fizzled out because of a Liv Morgan injury, and she's kind of floundered ever since. I think because the women's division now is much stronger a place than it was when the Bellas were last on the roster, that them returning together as a tag team, now that there is a tag team division and a tag team titles to shoot for, I think the Bellas as a tag team is the perfect use of the Bella Twins in the 2026 era of WWE, my opinion. So about this Rumble match, we had some folks who I think can very realistically hold their head high as winners because, as we've mentioned on this show numerous times in the past, the winner of the Royal Rumble is not just the person who's standing tall at the end in the middle of the ring. There are many ways to win in a Royal Rumble. And how in the world can you say that Lash Legend was not a winner in last night's Royal Rumble? She absolutely was. She got to play the role of Beast. She got to have the most eliminations. She was in for an impressive amount of time and was given a lot of focus in some of the bigger spots of the night. She rubbed shoulders with some of the biggest dogs that WWE has in their women's division. Your Raquel Rodriguez's and, of course, your Rhea Ripley's, among others, your Charlotte Flair's, legends, large, powerful women, and Lash looked like she belonged. She honestly has improved so much that it was an impressive run for her through the Rumble last night. I was happy to see Kalani Jordan. She is one of my low-key favorites that are NXT right now. She doesn't get the same kind of attention that your Lola Vices do, or certainly your Sol Rucas do. But let's talk about Sol Ruca. Sol was there almost from the beginning. Well, I guess technically if you're number two, you're not the first entrant, but still, you're there from the beginning. But Sol was there also at the end and was one of the final three and put on a heck of a performance, had probably some of the best spots of the Women's Royal Rumble. She had the Houdini effect going on where it was, how did she not get eliminated? How is she still hanging on? She's hanging on by her ankles. She's had a lot of near misses. Just had a really good showing overall and was in there right at the end. With some of the biggest names that WWE has to offer. So she certainly was a winner, even as she was eliminated there. And what I thought was a really clever sequence at the end. But didn't go her way, and it went the way of Liv Morgan, who becomes a first-time winner of the Royal Rumble. I mentioned on our last broadcast that WWE really does need to try to get some new faces in their main event scene. Well, obviously, Liv Morgan is a former champion, so that is not a new face, but it is a first-time win for her. So in that regard, it does seem a little more refreshing than maybe going with like a Charlotte Flair for a third time, even though I know that was a storyline, and that's not any offense to Charlotte or someone like a Becky Lynch. But Liv, despite being one of the bigger stars in WWE's women's division, probably was one of the more genuine surprises of the night. I think more people were thinking along the lines of a Becky or a Charlotte or a returning Bianca or an Io Sky. A lot of different ways they could have gone, but they went with Liv, and I'm all for it. Now, who does Liv challenge? That is not quite yet clear. There's not even a very clear, when you look at the current champions, there's not necessarily a clear choice for her there either. So we got several months to build a feud here, but let's see which direction Liv goes. As far as the match, we had mentioned this in a broadcast we did several years ago. We rated the top Rumbles of all time, some of the best. And we also had to admit that most Rumbles have a very hard time reaching that echelon of being amongst the best, but rarely are they out and out flops. When you have a match that has so many moving parts and it goes for an hour, most end up falling somewhere in the middle. I'd say this one, the women's Royal Rumble, was on the upper end of the middle, but still it won't go down as an all-time classic, and it certainly had its moments. It was maybe a bit formulaic at times, but it also just kept moving really nicely. It goes a long way in showing how much they have invested in their women's division, that there was enough subplots and alliances and tag teams and factions and history between the women that they were able to set the stage for a number of stories as we go into WrestleMania season. That was not always the case. So that alone is a big plus for this particular version of the Women's Royal Rumble, which again, I thought was a fairly strong match, even if it won't go down as one of the all-time greats. Which takes us to our first non-Rumble match. Let's talk about one of the all-time greats, and that is AJ Styles in a career-threatening match, as they dubbed it, against the man who has done more than just threaten careers. He's been ending them, and that is the ring general, Gunther. This match started exactly as you'd expect, with a lot of tribute given to AJ Styles, a big fight feel, a match that started slow and then hit another gear and continued to build and build and build. It was very much a Gunther style match. If you like that style, where he begins very methodically picking someone apart, and then it picks up in some drama towards the end. Obviously, the phenomenal AJ Styles was one of the best to ever do it. This is one I got right. Last week, I speculated that AJ Styles is not a John Cena type, and that is not a slam to him. It's just John Cena's on a different level. They milked everything they could out of a farewell tour, but I think that knowing that AJ's contract was supposedly due here in February, yes, it would have been simple to just give him an extension and let him roll out the rest of the year, but I really felt like there was something about AJ announcing the way he did, and the fact that he seemed so at peace with things that he was willing to walk away early, that he was just kind of done. The man never had lost the step. Right up to this very last match, he always gave 100%, wasn't showing signs of slowing down. Certainly can understand the fans wishing that he would have gone a little longer into this year so that we could all see him one more time. I'm sure those performances would have been great. There's a lot of, as they teased this past week on WWE television, interacting AJ with lots of stars that he's still could be working with. Javon Evans was a prime example that they did this week, to tease that, that's still something that we can have down the road if AJ's career would continue. But AJ Styles' career will not continue after about 20 minutes of back and forth. Some really believable spots at the end where you thought that AJ was maybe going to pull it off. Gunther locks on that sleeper and AJ just goes out. By the time he wakes up, he does not even know what's happened to him. Again, very much a Gunther style match for those of us who love that style. And I do believe that Gunther is about the most believable person to deliver that type of match. AJ can wrestle any type of match with any opponent. They put on a great contest here. It was one of the best things of the night. And sadly, the end of the phenomenal AJ Styles career. At the end, we get a tease of him leaving his hand gear, his gloves there in the ring, as wrestlers tend to do when they hang it up. They leave their boots, they leave their gear. He teased and then put it back on. So I've seen some folks speculating, does that mean that he's not really going to walk away as he had said he was going to do? I think that'd be a hard move for a babyface to make, to say that I'm retiring and then be in a match that is a career-ending match by stipulation and then not leave after all. So I truly believe that AJ is done in the business. That was more of a just fan service of, you don't want me to do this, so I'm going to, pose around the ring for you and soak in the adulation one more time. This isn't, a goodbye forever. It's a goodbye for now, because it was hinted at that maybe AJ is moving into different roles in the professional wrestling business. Triple H had said afterwards in the post show that he very much sees AJ as having a future in professional wrestling, even if it is not in the ring. Maybe there is something to that with AJ not taking off those gloves, but I truly believe he's going to live up to the stipulation and that this was it. And if it was it was a great match to go out on. It definitely disappoints me because we don't see AJ Styles anymore. I'm actually going to WrestleMania this year for the first time. So newsflash, I hadn't mentioned that here on the show yet, but very excited about it, and was very hopeful to see an AJ Styles match on his farewell tour. But again, not everyone's John Cena, and I think AJ was completely fine with announcing retirement and then walking away and not having a big tour and hullabaloo about it. But what role Gunther has, we will now see. Obviously, he is going to be positioned at Mania somewhere high up the card, because this is the man who is now, in the course of a year, sent home 3 legends into retirement, that being Goldberg, Cena, and now AJ Styles. So who knows? He might get back in the world title scene at Elimination Chamber. We'll just have to see. Which leads us to our second and final non-Rumble match, and that was for the World Championship. We had Drew McIntyre defending that title against not a hometown man, but someone with strong ties to the Middle East, that being Sami Zayn. The fans absolutely adore Sami there, as we all adore Sami, but particularly in that area of the world, they see him as an ambassador, and they were in it from the very beginning, hopeful that the underdog could come through against Drew McIntyre. This was another match that, much like Gunther and AJ, built throughout, and obviously was started in a way that you knew it was going to go long. But it didn't go too long. I'm sure Sami wished it would have gone a little bit longer. They got quicker into the near falls than what we saw in Gunther and AJ, which maybe took a bit longer to get to hit that next gear. But the match itself was what you would anticipate from these two. They have good chemistry together, but it also was the outcome that you probably could have expected as well. And that is Drew McIntyre retaining. The story of the match being about halfway through, you see that Sami, well, maybe not even halfway through, but Sami, on a dive over the rope, seems to have tweaked his back, and then that becomes the target for Drew, and that became part of the story moving forward, is that Sami just could not overcome the back issue that plagued him from the start of the match until Drew finally wore him down. It says a lot about the character of Sami Zayn and the love that people have for that character, that they gave enough hope spots at the end, that there were times that you could actually believe and see, well, maybe they will pull this switch off. Only 22 days into Drew McIntyre's title reign, which obviously didn't make a lot of sense to do, But even last week when I was previewing this, I managed to talk myself into thinking it was possible just because he won the right for this match in his home of Montreal, and that he would be having this match in his ancestral home, being the Middle East. I thought maybe that is why they dropped the belt from Cody to move to Drew, so that Drew could be interim champion, but Drew was not interested in being an interim champion. He now continues on his way to WrestleMania. It was not the last we would hear from Drew on this evening. We'll get more into that in our main event match that we're getting ready to go to next. But let's talk, before we do that, let's talk quickly where this leaves Sami Zayn. The storyline of Sami entering the latter half of his career and still needing to tick that one box of having never been a world champion. That is the story they told going into Royal Rumble. Does that story end here, or at least be put on pause until perhaps next WrestleMania season or sometime outside of WrestleMania season? Or do they find another way of having that story continue with a CM Punk, or maybe some other way to get him into the Elimination Chamber to continue this striving for the World Championship? It's not really clear where WWE is going with Sami after this loss, and that becomes even more so when we get here into our main event. So let's go to that main event, the men's Royal Rumble contest. Now, I know that Saudi Arabia has a very hot crowd, and they did bring it for this event, but you had to feel for these individuals at this point, because we're 3 matches into a 4-match card, and the heel has won every one. They got deflated by the heel winning in the Women's Royal Rumble. They certainly got deflated when AJ Styles gets retired unceremoniously by the hated Gunther, and then their hero, their one of their own, Sami Zayn, showed a lot of fire and then fell short at the end. Because of that booking, I immediately knew that my prediction on that one was going to be wrong. Up until then, I got both matches correct that were not Rumble matches. I didn't get the Women's Rumble match, and I certainly didn't get the Men's Rumble match right, because I had predicted Braun Breaker would be the person who would be the most likely to win. Instead, they went a whole different direction by having Braun Breaker be the very first person eliminated in pretty short order. So to start off this match, you have Obafemi. Number 2 out, here comes Braun Breaker, my favorite to win the whole thing. And before Braun even has a chance to step foot in the ring, he is attacked by a masked man who does a curb stomp. Do we know anybody that does curb stomps out there? Well, that was pretty much the beginning of the very quick end for Braun Breaker, who is thrown in, immediately eliminated by Obafemi. And so Braun Breaker is not moving on to the main event of WrestleMania. Now the mystery is going to be, who was that masked man? Obviously, we know Austin Theory had donned the mask and had been doing curb stomps, but that was mimicking Seth Rollins, who has obviously been out on injury. I don't know who was under that mask. It may not have actually been Seth Rollins, but they'll end up revealing it as Seth Rollins. Maybe there's problems within the division, and Austin is actually the person not to be trusted, as other members of the division were worried about before that they conceded to Paul Heyman to bring him in. But whatever it is, Braun Breaker now has a different path to WrestleMania. And I have to say that while it is intriguing, I would have much preferred to see him run roughshod through the Royal Rumble, just because, as I mentioned up top, we really, really need to get younger in the main event scene. Not even so much on the women's side as on the men's side, where it becomes a little predictable about who are the top couple of guys, especially when it comes to around Mania time, who are conceivable main event people. Last year, they did give us a surprise in Jey Uso. And you can argue that maybe didn't turn out so great. So maybe sometimes going for the predictable is the right choice, even if it is predictable. And they certainly went a little more predictable with this one. Before we get into who won, maybe we should also talk about surprises, who appeared and who didn't appear. Maybe the who didn't appear is the most significant part of this, because so many folks thought that this would be the chance for Y2J to return to WWE, as has been rumored for months, and that he is supposedly penciled in for a performance at WrestleMania. It would make all the sense in the world if that were true, to debut him at the Royal Rumble, but did not occur. I didn't predict it. One I did predict was that Powerhouse Hobbs would be making his debut, and in fact, that he certainly did. I do like the fact that if you're going to change the person's name, that you don't do as they did with Ricky Starks most recently, to change him to Ricky Saints, acting like they didn't know who they talked about him without mentioning a name. At least with Powerhouse Hobbs, they put him up on the big screen on the stage, Powerhouse Hobbs. Then they put his new name of Royce Keys. That's going to take some getting used to. Not a terrible name by any stretch. WWE has certainly penned worse. Maybe in 6 months' time, we can't imagine having called him anything else. Right now, it's just there for me. But at least they did acknowledge that he had a prior name and a prior reputation as a free agent. It was all that Michael Cole could do when talking about the past history, though, of Powerhouse Hobbs and Cody Rhodes, to not mention AEW, I do believe, but he did not. Unlike in the women's contest, we did get some AAA talent in this one, and I anticipated that. I predicted that on our preview show last week, that it would be a good opportunity to introduce AAA talent, since WWE owns AAA, to have them as members of the Royal Rumble. And we got Mr. Iguana, who was the most likely person of anyone in AAA to be here, with Asuka. Which also, you could have pretty well anticipated. We also got La Parka, who, while a AAA talent, the character has passed through many hands through the years. So they may have felt that was a safe one to introduce, because of the fact that people who watch WCW would maybe remember that incarnation of La Parka. Both were decently over and well received by the crowd. Obviously, Mr. Iguana was especially beloved by the crowd, which he appears to be everywhere that he goes. Before we get off Powerhouse Hobbs, though, maybe I will say this. I do think it goes to show that the reach of an AEW is still at such a distant number two, because Powerhouse did not get the kind of reaction that I think he would have got had this event been held in the United States, when maybe there were a few more fans who would have recognized him. But it also just goes to show that not every WWE fan is aware of what's going on in AEW and who some of the talent over there on that side of the fence actually are, because there wasn't a huge pop for Powerhouse. As such, it probably was good that they had him slated where he was in the middle, and they did not have him do too much, but they did have a few great spots where they teased what it could look like when he was be up against some of the bigger monsters in WWE. Just little crumbs that they are leaving us for the future. And speaking of the future, just like with Lash Legend in the women's division and her performance in the Royal Rumble, we can't talk about the men's Royal Rumble without talking about the performance of Obafemi. I would argue that the real winner of the Royal Rumble last night was Obafemi. He looked like the baddest man on earth. He was in the ring first and sat back and just eliminated everyone that came across his path for the first third of the contest. And it reminded me in some ways of the run that they gave Brock Lesnar 4 years ago, when he did something similar in the Royal Rumble. Was it 4? Yeah, 3, I believe now. Gosh, time is flying. But it worked for, obviously, Brock was already a star. Obafemi looked like a star and definitely shone as a star last night. In fact, all the former NXT talent did. One of my favorite moments of the entire pay-per-view was that moment when we had three men only that were standing in the ring, and they are the future of WWE and had quite the run in NXT. And that's when you saw Javon Evans, Trick Williams, and Obafemi standing tall, showing that this is going to be the future of the business. I wish the future was now. It would have been nice to have seen one of those three men take it on to the end. That was not the case. As far as other surprise returns, I guess outside of the AAA talent, the most you could say was we had an injury return in that LA Knight, who has been gone for just a little over a month. He made his return. He was very much over with the crowd. We got another injury turn in the original El Grande Americano, who faced off against the current El Grande Americano. I don't know that the crowd knew exactly what to make of that. It'll be interesting to see if that is a storyline that they go through moving on into WrestleMania season as to who is the real El Grande Americana. Obviously, the current version, the tall version, is being portrayed by Ludwig Kaiser. And we all know that the original El Grande Americano was a good bit shorter than Ludwig Kaiser. So it is definitely great to see him back, and it'll be interesting to see if they continue with a battle over who has the rights to that name. But that was really it when it came to return. So if you were sitting there waiting for Chris Jericho or The Rock or some sort of other larger surprise, the men's match did not necessarily provide that. Much like the women's contest, it was a bit formulaic, but also it was, I'd say, on the upper end of good. Again, not a top 10 classic, but it just falls somewhere in the middle, and they did enough and planted enough seeds for future storylines that you can't really complain about it. Obviously, I had predicted Bron Breakker. Bron Breakker wasn't around at the end. When we did get to the end, there were a couple of performers there that I had said would be around, that I had anticipated. And honestly, if you're looking for changes in the scene, and that's what I'd said earlier, you weren't expecting Jey Uso last year. It was obvious that John Cena was going to win, and then he didn't. And it was kind of a nice surprise. And maybe it didn't turn out the best in execution after that. So maybe sometimes it is okay to go with what is expected. And Roman Reigns was certainly someone that was anticipated as being a likely winner, and he has won twice. He had won before, so now he joins the ranks of two-time winners, and he's been a main eventer at WrestleMania a lot over the last decade. So if you were looking for something fresh to shake things up, you might be a little disappointed. But after those three straight heel victories, I fully anticipated that it was not going to be a Bron Breakker or another heel. I thought that maybe that they would go, if they were wanting to shake things up with someone young and fresh, maybe it would be a Jacob Fatu moment. But at that point, I did figure that it was more likely we were going to see Roman and or Cody. It should be noted that Cody was taken out not early, but it was in the back end of the match by Drew McIntyre. So I say that to say that Roman Reigns, who won a perfectly fine men's Royal Rumble, he has a choice to make. And obviously he doesn't have a set feud right now, or a set like problem with any of the current champions. Had Cody Rhodes still been the champion and they not made that switch shockingly on SmackDown a few weeks back to Drew McIntyre, you would say, well, we're going to get Cody Roman 3, which again may or may not interest some people, but it's just not clear what kind of beef they're going to have for Roman here. We have time to build it, obviously, but I do think that it is important to note that Drew McIntyre took Cody Rhodes out. Cody Rhodes is going to be looking for revenge. Not only did Cody Rhodes get get his title taken away from him through no fault of his own, really, Jacob Fatu getting involved. But now Drew McIntyre makes sure that Cody can't win the Royal Rumble and then challenge him in a rematch by taking him out of the Royal Rumble. All this means that Drew McIntyre's path to WrestleMania is going to involve Cody Rhodes and very likely Jacob Fatu as well. Whether or not they wrap that up at Elimination Chamber or take it all the way through to WrestleMania, I feel like that's one that they could probably take all the way to WrestleMania. So it's a way of saying that I do believe that Drew McIntyre's dance card is full, and that it looks to me as if Roman Reigns is going to find a way to get some beef going with CM Punk, which is not a match that we've seen a lot of. So in some ways, while not two fresh performers, they are certainly two talents that have been in the spotlight for a very long time, who are not overexposed as opponents against one another. And maybe that's something to get some juice for going for WrestleMania. But what do you think? How did these matches strike you? Were you satisfied with the outcomes? Did you like the matches themselves? Did you like the location of this event and how it looked and felt to you if you're watching on a Saturday afternoon live? Let us know. Drop it in the comments, and we will continue as we get further into Mania season to look back at Royal Rumble and maybe things and some of the decisions. If you're thinking some of these booking decisions were maybe a little strange, they may all make sense shortly, maybe even as soon as by the time we get to Raw, when things really start to take shape, because we are clearly heading fast now towards WrestleMania. And with that, let's hit our big finish. Botch of the week. I'm just going to keep beating that horse, right? Royal Rumble is one of the premier events that WWE puts on. It is their next to WrestleMania and arguably SummerSlam. It is the third biggest event they do. It's actually my second favorite event. I like it more than SummerSlam in general, and it's one of my favorite matches on the calendar. So it is a big deal when they take it on the road, and I am fine to have it be taken internationally. But going back repeatedly to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, taking the controversy of that decision aside, the look and feel of a less than full house wasn't ideal. So no matter how you look at it, whether from the moral aspect or from just the aesthetics of an empty stadium, not an empty stadium, but empty seats for one of your premier events, it just was a little lacking. So that lacking has everything to do with the choice that WWE made by having the event there, and that is going to be my botch of the week. My performance of the week. And that has to go to none other than the phenomenal AJ Styles. There's part of me that wants to give it to Liv Morgan just because I love Liv, and I was happy to see that she got a chance to be a Royal Rumble winner for the first time. But AJ Styles has given us 25 years of memories and amazing matches. I do believe that of this generation, he is the Shawn Michaels, what Shawn was to the 90s. And innovating the art of pro wrestling. For the 2000s, that mantle fell to AJ Styles. He was innovative. He was phenomenal. He put on match after match for 25 years in every corner of the globe. And if AJ Styles was on the card, you knew you were going to see a great match. Would TNA even still be around and to have the moment they're now having over on AMC if it wasn't for AJ Styles? AJ Styles was Mr. TNA, the biggest star that they ever had. And then for the last decade, he has done the same in WWE. And this is after a run in New Japan where he was a champion there. It's amazing. The first time I saw AJ Styles was on WCW Saturday Night. That is how far back it goes. That very young AJ Styles was making his debut in the very dying days, the last few weeks, in fact, of WCW at the time. He has been a constant presence, and unlike some who stick around maybe too long and we get to see them deteriorate or not be able to do the things that they were known to do and that we loved them for, we get to say goodbye to AJ Styles with AJ performing at the same level that he was performing in if you were watching him in the Impact Zone all those years ago. It's insane how consistent the man has been for so very long. We're going to miss AJ Styles. Thank you, sir. And whatever you do next, you have definitely earned the right to it. And that leaves me with the match of the week. There's part of me that wants to put the women's Rumble match in there because I do think of the two Rumble matches themselves, that it was the better of the two by just a fraction, just because of the cleverness of the end when the end of the men's match was a little less in doubt once we got down there to the nit and gritty of it. But I'm actually going to go with the match of Gunther versus AJ Styles. While most fans don't like the result, and while there's certainly folks who are getting sick of Gunther, that is the point, and they are definitely driving it home in a very entertaining way in my mind. And to do so on the back of one of the greatest to ever do it, when AJ Styles, the two of them, if you're going to go out, while it's strange in some ways to have AJ say goodbye and not in the United States, goodbye it was, and it was an emotional send-off and a fantastic match, and my match of the week. And with that, it brings to close another episode of the Two Bros Wrestling Show. If you didn't join us last week for the preview, I mentioned at that time that I would be doing the review this week, and then we're going to take a very, very brief hiatus. We're going to wait until Doug can return to us, and when he does, we will be back on the air. Keep tuned to our social channels, and you'll learn more. And obviously with WrestleMania season here, we're going to be back at it as soon as we possibly can. But until then, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you soon. Go watch some wrestling.